Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your newer suggestions. This one also having to do with yet another Inuit mythological creature. I've done several of these in the past. In fact, I might even make a playlist soon. That way I can group all of them together in one place. Make it easy for everyone to see them all at once. But it has to do with a legendary creature that's apparently found in Greenland and in other Arctic regions. And who knows, if you're out there for whatever reason, you may actually encounter this, especially if you're wandering alone at night. And it has to do with this. You're looking at it now. It goes by several names, but its most common name is known as the Amarok. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this legendary creature. So what is this Amarok? Well, it's a wolf-like creature that's found again in certain parts of Greenland and in other Arctic regions, and apparently it's been around a very long time, so long again that in fact it's been part of Inuit mythology ever since then. And the way the story goes is this creature, this wolf-like creature, as far as its physical characteristics, is this. It's basically a giant wolf, much larger than, let's say, your average wolf, but it looks like a wolf altogether, and it supposedly roams those lands by itself, and it devours any person who's foolish enough to, let's say, go out there at night. So even if, let's say, somebody there in those places happens to be a hunter and they're hunting by day, then they're absolutely fine. But if they go there at night, and especially by themselves, then that's where they have a chance of running into this very large creature. It also tends to have like larger claws, maybe some larger fangs as well. It seems to have a darker tone associated with its fur too, but for all intents and purposes is pretty much just a supersized wolf. But that in of itself is at least a physical characteristics. Altogether though, there's much more associated with this creature, including its ability to apparently, I don't know if you could call it communicate with people, but it definitely makes sure that it has an intelligent mind. Like, this is something else altogether. One of those spirit-like creatures that has an intelligence associated with it. Here's what I mean. For example, the story goes like this. Apparently, there's several tales associated with this creature that have gone back a long time. In fact, there's a book that's called Tales and Traditions of the Eskimo by Heinrich Johannes Rink, and in it talks about several legends that feature this Amarok. You could call those even folk legends as well. And the way I was reading this information, it made it seem like this is, I guess the closest equivalent here in the U.S. is like a tall tale of sorts. You know how you have something happening to some person, but then they end up either learning a lesson afterward, or through doing good things, they in turn get rewarded for it afterward as well. That's essentially what I was reading here with regards to the legend of this Amarok. It gives it that extra sense. The idea that it's there to serve a purpose to somebody that it comes across to. Now, there's always a chance, and I was reading some of this other parts too, that it devours people, that it's definitely a hunter in of itself, and there's that part. So you don't want to mess around essentially with an Amarok when it comes to that part. But in other tales that I was reading, it definitely gives like a positive sense to it. Like, it's almost there to help people as long as you don't cross it, and then that way you can ensure that it has its own intelligent mind, almost a conscience, if you will, a morals, another set of morals as well, and it all depends on the actual situation. Like, one of those tales goes like this. Apparently there was a small boy there that happened to be stunted. I don't know why he was stunted. Maybe he was born that way from birth, or maybe something else happened afterward, but he was very almost ashamed of that condition, and he wanted to increase his strength. And so the only way he did so, I don't know how he realized this, but he started calling out to an Amarok. Now, that's a very dangerous thing to do, again, considering the reports associated with them, again, devouring people and hunting them at night. But for whatever reason, an Amarok appeared and almost took pity on this poor boy. Instead of just eating him outright, this Amarok decided to wrestle him to the ground with its tail, almost like in a faux fighting challenge, like in a fake sense. Like, it knew it was easily going to win, but instead it decided to give the boy opportunities. Maybe it saw something within the boy that Amarok saw in itself. Either way, though, when this happened, for whatever reason, a small set of bones fell from the boy's body, and then the Amarok, remember I was mentioning earlier how it almost seems to communicate with people, told the boy, I don't know if it was through, let's say, its mouth or through something involving the mind, it at least told the boy that this had prevented its growth, and he told the boy that now he can develop his strength. All he had to do was just return on a daily basis, and the Amarok would teach him that strength. And so that happened for the next several days, and the boy kept coming back. They started wrestling with each other. They continued to do so through a repeated manner, and then lo and behold, after that occurred, the boy was now strong enough, not only that, to take on the Amarack, but in another challenge, this boy took on 3 large bears and then defeated them. And then when he came back to his village, instead of him being ashamed of his condition, now everyone else there within the village was praising him. Like they saw him as a very popular character. You see how it almost seemed like a folk-like legend, like a tall tale of sorts involving this Amarack. So who knows essentially if this really occurred, but it gives you an idea again of how the Inuit mythology involving this cryptid plays, and the idea again that it could be something else instead of just something that devours people. And yet in another tale there's this. Apparently there was an anonymous man who had a relative die. And when that happened, he in turn also seeked an Amarack. I don't know exactly why he was seeking him. Maybe he wanted to do along the lines, for lack of a better term, something like suicide by Amarack, where he would in turn do something that make the Amarack so mad that it would cause the Amarack to kill him, to finally do something because the man was not able to kill himself. Well, as he went out there, he was joined with another family member, and instead of finding the Amarack, they found the pups associated with the Amarack, these teeny tiny pups. And so in his state of mourning, this man decides to instead kill all of these small wolves. And he did so probably in a very brutally fashion, and apparently this was done within one of the caves that the Amarack was there. Like, in other words, the Amarack had there in that location. And so when they decided to wait for this Amarack, it never came, and so they decided to leave. But as they did so, they saw that the Amarack returned, and this time it was carrying a reindeer in its mouth. So it gives you an idea again that it was on the hunt instead of for people, but instead it was for animals, and it was bringing this animal, this carcass, back to its younglings, and then that way it could help feed them. Of course, when the Amarack returned, that's when it found that everything was, as far as his offspring were killed, and she in turn was very, very mad as this. The mourner in that case decided to hide. They wanted to make sure, for whatever reason now, instead of wanting to be killed by the Amarack, maybe they got a sudden sense of wanting to live, and so they didn't want to have this Amarack find them, and so they hid in one location. But as the story goes, this Amarack has nothing that can be concealed for it. It's that type of creature. It almost has an omnipresence associated with it. It can definitely find anyone around it. And so when it did so, this Amarack, instead of going directly to that mourner, the same mourner again that killed all of its offsprings a little earlier, it for whatever reason went to some river, and when it did so, it took out from the river this mourner. So it took me a while to comprehend this, but I think I got it. So essentially, while this mourner was hiding physically in another place nearby, the Amarack instead went to a river and somehow took out like a doppelganger of this mourner, this very same person, like it was an exact copy of it. But as it turns out, this exact copy was the soul of the mourner. So somewhere along the way, this Amarack was able to physically take the soul of a person from this magical river, or it did some kind of innate ability, something that we just don't know as far as this Amarack of what it can do. And when it did so, it was able to get the soul, and then right at that point it killed the soul of this mourner, which in turn caused that mourner who was hiding again from another location to collapse. And so that was really interesting to read. So this Amarack has that special ability. It can essentially pull out someone's soul from their body, and then when that occurs, that causes that person's body to collapse as well. When I was reading this, it reminded me of the Chronicles of Riddick. I forget who that character was, the name of that character, but the main bad guy, the way he was able to pull people's souls from their bodies, and then people would see that soul, and then that person would kill the soul, which causes the person to in turn die afterward. That's the way I interpreted this here. Bad example, but still, it's the closest one that I could think of as far as what this Amarack did. So definitely, again, something you do not want to mess with when it comes to its abilities. Not only, again, is it able to hunt its own at night, not just people, not for animals, but also it has these metaphysical characteristics as well. One last thing I wanted to mention about the Amarack, apparently it's gone pop culture, if you could call it that. In fact, there's a Volkswagen Amarack, which you're looking at now. It started production back in 2010, and it was named that way because Volkswagen wanted to make sure that they had something associated with the word wolf. And so they wanted to, I guess, present it as a powerful car because it's based off of a powerful creature. And that's first time I've ever seen any kind of cryptid associated with a large company like this. I've seen some other examples in the past where there was more on the lines of like posters, and I think I remember one that was involving a Coca-Cola bottle, but this is something else, and this was a bottle from like years back. This is in turn a major international company, something along the lines of a Fortune 500 type company that happens to have this as a main name of one of its vehicles. I mean, we're talking a multi-million-dollar branding here. So very fascinating when I was reading that information. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, please post those comments below. Anyone there from the Greenland area or any of the other Arctic regions that knows more on a local level about this Amarack, please let me know. One last thing I wanted to mention too, you're in the presence of an Amarack, even though it looks like a wolf, like a regular wolf, because of this. It goes by itself, and wolves are not necessarily known to do that. So if you happen to see a wolf out there in the Arctic regions just roaming by itself, and again, it has that darkish hue tied to it, there's a good chance that you might be looking at the legendary Amarack, just because of the fact, again, that so rarely are that wolves do this. Wolves are pack hunters. They always stay together in some kind of pack. So seeing one by itself definitely increases that chance. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.